Have you ever thought, why do I suck at fantasy football? Welcome. This is the Commissioner Fantasy Football Podcast.
Welcome to the second part of the basics of fantasy football. And what I mentioned before, and I want to mention today again, is knowing the fundamentals of fantasy football is one of the key things you can do playing in your league, playing in any league basically. And I've found this to be the most truest thing about fantasy football, is knowing the rules. As I mentioned in the prior basics part number 1, knowing the rules is the biggest key. Knowing the point systems, the little bonuses, the type of scoring, it changes everything about the way you play, the players you choose in your draft, or even the waiver wire pickups, so players you pick up on the waiver wire. So one of the things I did leave out in the prior podcast was I went over positions. Quarterback, if you remember, 2 running backs. You usually want to have more wide receivers because there's more of them. So you want to have more availability to start in your lineup. So you're starting 1 quarterback, usually 2 running backs. Then you're getting into 3 wide receivers. You got the tight end, kicker. I hope your league doesn't have kickers, but a lot of leagues do. So, and then the defense. And one of the things I did leave out was a flex position. And this is most leagues have a flex position. And this position is basically you could put anybody there but the quarterback or the defense. So I think you could put the defense. Most leagues, I never even tried, but I think you could put the defense in there. So don't quote me on there, but I know you could put the kicker. Why would you? I have no clue. But you cannot put the quarterback. That's one key thing. So you basically could put a running back in there, you could put a wide receiver in there, or you could put a tight end in there. Most people, based on this position, the flex position, put running backs in there because running backs tend to score more points than any other position, and wide receivers. So usually you'll find that in most leagues. Some leagues have 2 flex positions, so they'll take the wide receivers. Instead of having 3 of them, they'll have 2, and they'll have 2 flex positions. So a lot of leagues vary, but that's something to look into and to know about, that, hey, there's this position in fantasy football that you could put other players in there. So something key to know about. And so if you've been playing fantasy, if you haven't, but a lot of times, the first time I played fantasy football, I think I took a quarterback in the 2nd round. Now that doesn't make sense because there's so many quarterbacks available that score enough points. The difference between the top quarterbacks like a Patrick Mahomes, and I'll give you an example, Matthew Stafford almost never gets drafted. Some leagues he just never gets drafted. But if you compare the difference between the quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks, and for example, Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions, he's pretty good and he goes undrafted. And so that's the thing with the quarterbacks is you don't want to draft a quarterback too early. And when I do a draft podcast, I'll definitely go over that. But if you're in a 1 quarterback league where you can only start 1 quarterback, drafting a quarterback early it's not worth it. Outside of this rule of not drafting a quarterback early. You can argue with Patrick Mahomes, but now Lamar Jackson. So there's a few quarterbacks where I don't think you should draft Lamar Jackson in the 1st round or even the 2nd round. But taking a Lamar Jackson in the 3rd round is worth it. And I'll explain. Because Lamar Jackson, like if you know Michael Vick back in the day, he doesn't just get you passing yards and passing touchdowns. Now he's rushing. This guy rushed, I think he averaged over 80 yards or something over 70 yards a game. He's almost like a running back in a quarterback position. So there comes a time where it's not the normal rule, but in this case, this year if you're drafting, Lamar Jackson is a decent option. Now, he could regress. Sure. He could rush lower. Maybe teams will pick up on it because a lot of defenses study these quarterbacks because they want to they don't want to allow him to rush these yards. So there's an exception to the rule, but I feel like one of these rules, and I'm going to argue it a lot in my podcast, is if you're in a one quarterback league, don't draft a quarterback too early, because there's more value in drafting more running backs, more wide receivers, because especially running backs, they get injured a lot. So that's something for the future that I'll talk about, a super flex position. But that kind of, what fantasy football wants to do is balance out the fact that a lot of leagues now realize, hey, why are we drafting quarterbacks so early? So nobody drafts quarterbacks until later. So they lose value. So people are coming up and saying, well, let's go to a super flex league where a quarterback's more valuable. Now you can start 2 quarterbacks. So that's something for the future. But all right, some more basic things about fantasy football. One of the things I learned really maybe the hard way was, I joined the league back then. It was an 8-team league, then it became a 10-team league. Having the wrong commissioner commission a league, it could be a big problem. And I've seen it in numerous times. In that league, we had a person, which is my brother. So, sorry, buddy, if you're listening to me. He wasn't really into it. And if people came with problems, he would kind of more brush them off or didn't seem like to care. And as a commissioner, I feel like the most important thing is you got to care about the things that come up, the problems that come up, because people will have problems in the league. People will come to you with stupid problems. Like, can you do this? Can you do that? And you have to be fair, but you also have to be approachable, meaning that you're willing to make a change. So for me, when I became a commissioner, number one thing was I'm going to learn during the season. So there's things you learn, right? There's mistakes you make. Use an example of not playing. We played in the standard league and people came up, well, we want to play in a full PPR league. And people came up with different, saying, well, we don't want to play. And, what I did was the next year I said, hey, let's vote on it. Look, I've listened to both sides. Let's vote. If we cannot do full PPR, let's go half PPR. Because we want to have some value for the catches players make. So a good league has a commissioner who listens. On top of that, he allows people to make the decision, not just dictate. I could have said, we're going to play full PPR. If you like it or not, you can leave. That's not the right way to do it. It's just not. It's not good leadership in any scenario in life. But especially in this fantasy football, it's just a game. But again, people take it seriously because people put money into it. People want to have fun. And if you don't have a good commissioner who's listening or is paying attention to the league or making changes, evolving as fantasy football evolves every single year. There's something new. The commissioner has to evolve with it. And if he doesn't, it's just you're going to be in a bad league. You're going to have problems. And I'll give you another example. I joined a league where at some point, the commissioner tried to take control, but it was more, again, from a dictatorship, meaning that he didn't really listen or say, hey, next year we can do this, but saying, no, this is the way it's done. If not, get out. This is a game we're playing. But you have to go back and think about it that way as a commissioner. If you're a commissioner who's listening, think about it that way. This is a game we're playing. Okay, we don't want to be mean. We don't want to dictate. We want to have fun. And I'm going to get to that a little later. We want to have fun. We want to have a season that we have fun, and we want to have people that come back. And that's the key, I think, to fantasy football, is making that league fun, but it starts with a commissioner. It starts with explaining the rules, making things simple, making sure everybody understands everything. This is not just you kind of brush it off and whatever. People tell me things and I don't care, right? It's kind of, I don't care, you do it my way or the highway. It shouldn't be like that. So one of the key things I found in fantasy football is making sure your league has a good commissioner. And if you're a commissioner, I'm asking you, I'm actually going to beg you, be flexible, be nice, listen to people, try to make your league fun. Again, bottom line, this is a game we're playing. So, all right, so let's get into, I think there's 2 things that I want to focus on that make a league fun, or make a league great, or make a league that people want to come back to. So a couple of things. So number one is fairness. Looking to make sure that there's a fair playing field for everybody. And this again goes back to the rules. Setting the rules to make them as fair as possible. For me, okay, I started to evolve. Because playing, for me, the argument, playing in the standard league, you're not rewarded for the catches. Some players get more catches, some get less. So you want to reward that. So again, I had to kind of side, okay, there's a standard league, full PPR. Let's go in the middle, half PPR. Everybody agreed in one of the leagues. And then I started to evolve, like I mentioned in the prior podcast I did. Hey, we have this app that I found out about, I don't know, like 3-4 years ago. It's called the Sleeper app. It gives you more functionality. It gives the commissioner more ways of scoring the league. So that's why I came up with the whole tier PPR, which is helpful now because now you're kind of balancing and making things fair. And as again, every year, as I explain to the league mates, the people that play in my league, again, the people have a tendency, number one, to say, we don't want any changes. We don't want to change anything, especially if they were winning, for example. But I always try to explain, say, hey, I'm here to try to make things fair, more fair. It's one of the keys to fantasy football is making things fair. When things are fair, then when somebody loses, they're not sour. They're like, well, cough it up to bad luck. There's injuries, whatever it is. And the second thing is making a league fun. So it kind of goes together. Fairness comes if you make a league fair. The fun comes in. But there's another thing to it that I found out. The people that play in your league, there's some people that they're going to be grouchy. They're going to complain. I'm not saying to kick those people out, but look for people who want to have fun. And I'll give you an example in one of my leagues. And if Danny, you're watching this, his name is Danny Vargas. He came to our league about 2 years ago. All right? Dude, he's so into playing fantasy football, I think maybe even more than I am. And on top of that, when somebody's super into it and makes it fun and doesn't judge or doesn't criticize or doesn't call out people, but he's there to have fun. One of the things I found out, like for example with Danny, was he loved trading. He's like, hey, let's trade. And our league, all of a sudden, everybody started to get involved. And when everybody gets involved in the league, when there's a lot of trades, because you could trade players, man, how the league became more fun. And everybody in my league can attest to it. That he came into our league 2 years ago and things just changed. We're having a lot more fun. We're having trades off season because we're in the keeper league, and I'll get to that later on. There's different types of leagues. But man, how one person can change your league. So look for people who want to have fun, who are into it every week, even if they're losing. I remember the first year Danny was losing, but he was making trades because for future draft picks, whatever, but he was still in it. So that's one of the things people tend to forget and say, well, you kind of get used to everybody and you play in the same league and it becomes mundane. It just becomes boring. So, if somebody doesn't want to play, just say, hey, you don't want to play, you can leave. And fortunately for us, we got this guy who just literally changed everything. So look for people who want to have fun. If you want to start a league, look for people that are going to be into it, that love football. And you'll probably find a bunch of people like that. All right, so as I mentioned before, rules are the key to any league. But one of the things that I kind of want to get into and kind of maybe emphasize or put above maybe all other things is, like I said, having people in your league play, but actually making the rules fair. So if you have certain rules that are unfair, make sure you change them the next year. Because there's so many examples of these kind of rules or things that we set, right? So a biggest thing is that happens in fantasy football is you get, towards the end of the season, right? Now, certain teams are going to lose. It's just the way of life. Teams are going to lose. So when you're getting to the playoffs in fantasy football, a lot of teams are left at the bottom. And one thing I found out over the years, the teams that are, they go 2-8, they're already out of the playoffs and there's like 3 weeks left, they give up. I had one player one time, because he was out of the playoffs, he just dropped all the players. It was his first time playing. I'm not going to blame him. But he just dropped all the players. And I was like, that's not how we're supposed to be. So one of the things that I think as a commissioner, if you're the commissioner who's listening, but in your league, please bring it up. Make sure there is a bottom bracket, like a punishment. So in our league, what we do is 6 teams out of the 10 teams, 6 teams make the playoffs. And there are 4 teams that are left at the bottom. So we want to make sure that they have something to play for. So what we do is we create a punishment. So you're down at the 4 teams that are out of the playoffs. Now you're playing against each other. So for example, the bottom 4 teams are 7, 8, 9, 10. 7, 8, 9, 10. Doing some math here. So these 7, 8, 9, 10 teams are at the bottom. So 7 plays 10 that first playoff week, and then 8 plays 9. And so you kind of create this other bracket that these teams are playing for. So now they're playing for, if they win, if they lose, they move on to the loser bracket to play in the loser, we call it the Toilet Bowl Championship. So you're basically trying to win to stay out. So if a team loses back-to-back in these weeks, they become the Toilet Bowl champion, meaning there's some kind of punishment. So for example, in our league, we've been using a license plate, a pink license plate that after the season's over, you have to put on your car, and it says Fantasy Football Loser, and it's all pinked out, and it's all glimmered, and you have to have it on your car. So people now have a thing to play for in this loser bracket. He's saying loser bracket, but it's a loser bracket. So now they have something to play for. So now in your league, until pretty much the last weeks of the playoffs, everybody's playing for something. That is one of the biggest keys I found to all the leagues I commission in. That is the biggest key, because now you keep everybody involved pretty much until maybe week 16, where only 2 teams are left playing for the championship. And so it just makes things a lot more fair for everybody, because people are still active. People don't want to lose, right? People don't want to be the last team. So I hope that clarified at least one of the keys of having a successful league, especially if you're a commissioner. You don't have, there's so many examples. You could go Google. There's so many examples of punishments that people have in fantasy football leagues. You could be creative. That's the fun part. Be creative. Come up with something in your league. Bring it up. And if you're a commissioner, let people vote on it. It makes things more fun. So again, just to kind of summarize, rules are key. Make sure as a commissioner, the rules are clear for everybody. And as a player, as a team owner, whatever your team is, make sure you know the rules before your draft. And on top of that, again, let's make sure things are fair and fun. And then make sure people are playing an entire season. So come up with something to keep people active. And get people, and if you're starting a league, get people who want to have fun, who don't take this seriously, because again, this is a game. Fantasy football is a game. Don't take it seriously. If you're in a 12-team league, 11 out of the 12 people are going to lose. If you're in a 10-team league, 9 out of the 10 people will not win a championship. They will lose. Look, there's only one champion every year, and it's hard. It's not easy. It has a lot of luck, but it involves a lot of skill, meaning that paying attention every week, setting your lineups, things like that. So hopefully this helps. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time.
Dude, you better not be sleeping after that podcast. That was an amazing message. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Commissioner. Also subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Any comments, questions, concerns, send them to the Instagram page, The Commissioner, your fantasy football guide.